Ne, možda treba da vam ljutiš. Ne, to sam ja ovo.
Hello. Yes. Ich habe die falsche Figur. resulted for a very dedicated work of 8 women, supported by 5 volunteers and a lot of guys from the IT team. According to how the festival has been done up to now, it's the model how the world will be governed. So, ladies supported by gentlemen. Today we have a fantastic guests coming from various sides of the world, and I'm very glad about that because the issues we are going to be speaking about today are actually changing in the various historical contexts and in the geographical contexts as well. It will be interesting to hear the impressions of our guests coming from Palestine, Rwanda, Great Britain, Germany, but also from Serbia. As I said, historically, the circumstances were changing within the lives of our participants. Also, I believe the circumstances changed. It is interesting to hear how today, when we are in front of the challenging environment, how this looks like for gender minorities. What are the ways to overcome the obstacles and the problems? Second part, how to find the solutions so that structural and other problems be overcome. First speaker will be Professor Milena Dragicevic-Šešić with a very rich biography. I will be very glad to hear her opinion about this. She is a professor of management in cultural politics and cultural and media studies at the Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Belgrade. She was a rector at the University of Arts and the lady professor all around the world. She is the UNESCO Department for Cultural Politics and Management at the University of Arts, European Commission in Brussels, European Cultural Foundation, as well as the president of the jury of experts for European Award in Cultural Policies. She published more than 20 books translated in 17 languages, and she has been twice awarded the big golden plaque of the University of Arts in 2004 and 2019, and she is the activist in the civil sector in culture. Now the professor will speak to you. I am very glad to have the opportunity to participate because this is the theme that I have been dealing with for years. And sorry, the speaker does not have the microphone, so we are having a little bit of problems with hearing the speaker. Dobro. Sorry, it works now. So let me repeat for the translation. Two questions I had in mind. Who will in today time be the major actors to deal with the development of culture and the aesthetics of welcome, of solidarity, of care? And who are the ones to fight for the new equal culture of remembering? So the PowerPoint I started with two slides. The first one pointing to the work of the Dach Theater, actually the Forgotten Women. The movement theater, by celebrating 100 years existence, they were forgotten absolutely, as they were many times before. Svetlana Tomic has published a book about the famous women but forgotten in the Balkans, but also through the Dada movement. We see that this is the European trend, the world trend. The women can be famous and in their own time and then forgotten completely. On the other side, there is a manifestation, a performance art of the civil public that also has become forgotten. For the 31st May to 1992, that's been forgotten. The new generation have never seen this photo. That is why I wish to draw your attention to the Paul Conardon and his 7 types of forgetfulness. I will not speak much about, I will not dwell upon this too much. I will enlarge this picture. Me and my colleague Milana Stefanovic thought that the 2 major types of forgetfulness, he in his studio, about 7 types of the study, he did not provide for them. That's the forgetfulness as the silence that's embarrassing. This is what the activists of the civil times fighting against. So the forgetfulness towards Srebrenica, that's the embarrassing silence. We are embarrassed too much to know what has happened and to remember it. But there is a lot of also forgetfulness that is out of the confusion. What about the socialism? What about the socialist Yugoslavia? The right parties yell against the left parties that they are the red band because they are speaking, they are insulting. Let us not speak anything about the socialist movement. Let us forget about it. Let us disperse with it. In our cultural sector also, forgetfulness absolutely is covering what was done by everybody who was not in the mainstream. We, within the alternative as well, what you see now is what nobody never would link the new sensibility that remained famous for what Major Egon Savin, Suada Kapic and other directors did. But the workshops with the gypsy and other children in Skadarlija, the new sensibility organized by Zorica Evremovic, it was totally forgotten. It was not enough artistically important to remember, for us to remember. So these questions, anti-war performances in the Center for Cultural Decontamination of the Dak Theater, it is only remembered by us, by the alternative. It did not enter the workbooks, the history of the theater, the canon of the culture of a country. That is why I am eager to show this. This is the 10th July, before the Day of Remembrance to Srebrenica in Belgrade. We act the performance for all the victims of war, but media does not report much on this. You would think, although, we needed the artistic couple on the Biennale of Nadezhda Petrovic in Čačak 2007 to reconstruct this monument and return it to life. It was forgotten instantaneously, maybe because women of Čačak built it, not the municipality, not the government, not the state, but the women of Čačak in 2007. And now this is the Embassy of America that makes us remember it, because nobody else will. Are we now living in a post-purpose world? After the purpose, after the sense, are we living in a click and instantaneously you will forget in practice? By clicking any kind of social network, you will pay out your duty to all the problems in the world. What about the public policies? What is their purpose? What are they doing? What is going on the other hand in reality? This is the picture that shows very well the cultural politics and the educational training policies. They are trying to need a society of human rights, not only the market, but the populism, political populism society. They destroy it very fast, and the best ideas, the best intentions of the government, of the ministry, they did not come to light. The gender equality and how it actually looks like in Serbia, in what is the Serbian Academy of Sciences. the numbers. I don't need to read them all, but we have here the disequality. Also, I would like to to make you remember what happens among us. We don't have the sense, the feeling with the Museum of the Contemporary Art of Vojvodina. When they organize the themes and the gatherings, no woman attend them. Between the organizers and between the participants as well. The theme as the field of the social power is the response of the actors of this project was that the women objectively don't have the social power, so I was not in a position to call them, to give them the importance that they are lacking objectively in the society. If the best between us act like this, most probably this will never happen. I would like to show you here a few photos of the artistic work of Milica Tomic, Milica Stevanovic, who actually entered the absolutely policy of forgetfulness. These are the radical works challenging the general remembering policies. The 4 persons of the Omer workshop led by Milica Tomic here are hung on Terazija, her reenactment performance of the Nazi hanging. The people, the majority of people are passing by and they don't even turn around. Political research as a starting point, I will show it now. The 7 women are not in the first 39, but in the first 50. From the 39 to 50th, there is no female actor. So you see how much in Serbian culture the female artists are forgotten. This is not worst in the world. Madrid, Prado Museum, only 3 women out of 1,000 of men are exposed in Prado Museum. So we do have the worst environments in Europe. But I would like us to be aware of this. The question was about the gender equality in the challenging context, in the context that here is the work of the Sanja Iveljković. I would like to point out that the critical issues posed by women, at least through the art, are received with a hostility. This work was received with very high hostility in Luxembourg. Go back to the Balkans. Maybe in the Balkans the female are raped in the war, and maybe there you need to speak about it. With us in our country, we remember heroes, we remember the heroic wars. Don't embarrass our monument. She made a copy of the monument to the winners in the First World War, but the female here was raped and he was pregnant, and this was very insulting for their public. This is the history class led by Anna Vilenica. The occasion was the rewriting of the history. Her work were never registered here because they refer to the oblivion that is very embarrassing to something that was done in Kosovo. I think it is time for me now perhaps to wind up, to conclude. This is the list of the new drama authors of the world. I'm proud to say that the last pink row are Serbian drama writers. Compared to the above, the Czech, the Germany, there are no women there, maybe a little bit in Great Britain and so on, but in Serbia we are represented exclusively through women drama writers. I have to say that it is one of the traditional things that our faculty is very proud of, because by opening the cathedra for the drama, after that, in the 1970s, majority of the women who received the Steria award are actually from there. The women here are posing key questions. They are the ones to pose the key questions regarding the position of the migrants, the once asking for the asylums, the refugees. The today's world discourse actually uses the word migrant instead of refugee, making it apolitical and neutral. Migrants, as when I travel or decide to go somewhere else to live, I'm the migrant. But 90% of those that we see are in essence refugees, not the asylums that have been expelled and that will be for the gender discrimination, for sexual discrimination, and so on, forced to leave their country. Now they are the migrants. I see here, if we can talk a little bit about that, if there is time enough, why in these actions the ones who prevent raising awareness are actually the women. You see here the right wing, the Nationalist People's Party of Austria, in Innsbruck, I think, and they attacked the artist that actually wants to raise the interest and awareness and so on. Similarly, the work of Tanya Ostoich now lives in Berlin. You tell me whether she is a migrant, asylant, or exilant. They were censored. Origine du Monde. It was censored in Austria, required by the curator who, without any word, took it off from the exhibition. No artist showed solidarity. Through this slide, I wanted to return the question of the artistic solidarity, of the solidarity of the cultural public with the artists when they are attacked, when they are censored, but with any other social group, with the migrants when they are attacked, censored. What happened with this need of the people to be the support to one another? That is why the word aesthetics and ethics and culture of care about another human being. There are numerous examples worldwide in the West Europe. I wanted to speak here about an example when, out of the best intention, as the Birmingham Theatre, to do something for the equality, not only gender equality, but the minority and any other equality, on the scene of the Birmingham Theatre, the art of the minor author can be presented. The Gorpretka Urbati was selected as a competition, but the C community, as in Birmingham, they made a demonstration preventing the exhibition. What for me is a symptom here you can expect of a national community that feels lonely and jeopardized in the world, to defend and to get the strength, but not one theater in the world after that even tried to put this drama, to exhibit it, at least to celebrate the rights of the artist and the freedom. And this is a plus. The she artist, the lady artist from the minority group, this is a symptom for me. Of course, the situation in India itself is like this, let alone Pakistan. Something like this would there be totally impossible. There are some other examples of the radical artistic practices, some of them like Sheila Kameri ended up in the museums. The multiple has 8 rights to be multipled in 8 museums in the world. This is the work of Maya Bajević, dedicated to the women of Srebrenica, women in action. It's not so well known because nobody wants to remember them. To those widows, nobody was so generous, so careful, and this is the art that they know that they create, and that it's in their hand. They tried with it, but there are not many people in front of this museum in Sarajevo who would come to monitor this work. Similar thing is with the minority and the artists, the lady artists of this minority, who always pose the key question. Kiba Lundberg, the gypsy artist from Finska, is enfant terrible of the artistic scene. Thanks to her scandals on this scene, actually she does exist. But Omara, the gypsy artist from Hungary, does not exist in the Hungarian artistic scene, let alone the Leileban, on the British, and so on. That is why I struggle for the critical thought for the human rights by which the gender equality will return to the first plan of care, and where we, people like me, the cultural workers and managers and theoreticians of culture, will be aware to the neglect, to the deletion, and to destruction itself, post-mortem destruction of the female human rights, although in numerous cases such as this chain, the women were of the Latvia origin, they were in the first rows, like the women are in the first rows of struggle today in Belarusia, where we sometimes get an information or two, but there also I don't see big important solidarity with the gallery in the free theater in Belarusia, with our real partners who are there or who are in the exile, such as the free theater. Let us support them in the moments where the standard human rights are jeopardized. Of course, many will say it's not true that the female art rights are jeopardized. You have famous lady artists worldwide. Yes, but very often they do deal on the conscious or subconscious level, supporting the various types of stereotypes in women. With their success, they report or they destruct the stereotypes, and the horse, she reenacts the position of the father on the white horse, not the mother, who has also fought for the freedom, was the hero, and so on. And she explores how many throughout the world has explored as well the Orientalism. This is a small segment of the Balkan paganism, Serbian Orientalism in the eastern Serbia that has been attracted, through the media and in other kind, that women are only for the emotion, not for anything else, for the emotion, for the trance. This is another example where something that is female tradition is not only jeopardized and used to bad purposes, but it was allowed for emancipation by the group Shkart, using of the artistic form that led to the lady emancipation. Where was I up to now, and where did I hide my poems up to the workman's emancipation? On the other hand, so the director falls down like a falling star, and the female hands will tear them off. It can also be for the purpose of making women aware, making them strong. I will conclude with this. Thank you.
Thank you for this inspiring and very rich speaking, which will lead us to a flourishing conversation. We have finished the introduction for the guests. They are going to speak after this. The next is Gabi Frenger. She is a professor of Emeritus of International Social Work and Development of Coburg, University of Applied Science and Art in Germany. She's a board member of Women in One World Center for Intercultural Research of Women's Everyday Lives and International Exchange. She's also a co-founder of the Museum Women's Culture, as well as a board member of the International Association Women's Museum. Her academic and curatorial work focuses on human rights, peace building, regional and international women's history, human rights and popular rights, and of course, testimonial textile. Professor Tanger is going to have the presentation with Tijana Jakovljević-Šević. She's an ethnologist, anthropologist, and senior curator. She's a team member of Women in One World Center for Intercultural Research of Women's Everyday Lives and International Exchange of Museum of Women's Culture, Regional International in Bavaria. I just want to say hello to Gabi and Diana, and we're going to start with their film, the film about museum.
Ne, mora ona da priča, prevodioc.
Says working in the field. So whenever you're ready, please.
Okay, thank you. I thank you for the invitation and the nice presentation. I am you can see. I will talk together with Tiana about the approaches of our museum. I have to share. One moment, please. I'm sorry. Now we can start. Women in One World Center for Intercultural Research on Women's Everyday Lives and International Exchange was founded in 1989 by researchers, artists, and educators of different native languages as an interdisciplinary forum for cross-cultural studies and international solidarity. With our exhibitions, and since 2006 with our museum, Women's Cultures, Regional International, we offer a space for dialogue to discuss controversies locally and globally related to the past and to the present, always with the aim of initiating intercultural and cross-cultural dialogues. Our approach to conscientization is mainly rooted in the structures of women's own lives, their inherent wishes, and the capacities of women themselves. One important dimension of dialogue is the relation between feminist visual arts and the so-called popular art or handicraft, as well as the discourse about female art forms and their subversive potential. Since our foundation, we have worked with textile art and studied its role in social and political movements.
During the 70s, within the feminist movement, women's handicrafts came into the focus of research in the social sciences and arts. Traditional textile techniques, which until then represented a paradigm of social expectations of women, are becoming a reflection of the involvement in politics in the private lives of women and their subordinate social position. Among them, embroidery stood out, which as a popular hobby and skill that is learned both at home and at school, is seen as accessible medium that reaches wider audience than, for example, painting. Special emphasis is placed on the presentation of embroidery as a skill that simultaneously enters the field of homework and art, while in the research discourse, knowledge of the history of embroidery is equated with knowledge of women's history. In addition to embroidery, within the second wave of feminism, interest in quilting has grown, which is also shown through the duality between homework and art, and oppression and resistance. This technique, used by generations of women to make home textiles, could be acknowledged as women's autobiographies and women's literature, which could be written even by those women who were actually illiterate. In addition, a significant aspect of this object was the collective work of women in their production. Since then, thousands of mentioned objects with anti-war and patriotic messages related to women's reproductive rights or raising awareness on various socially important topics have been created. The connection between crafts, art, and activism continued among third-wave feminists.
Needlework, such as embroidery or quilts, do not only unfold unexpected aesthetical enjoyment, but point out specific ways of describing and reflecting women's everyday lives, personal experiences, suffering, and resistance. With these slides, we present only some different approaches from Chile, Panama, Zimbabwe, and projects of our museum. In Chile, the women who embroidered and stitched so-called arpilleras courageously expressed themselves through their subversive images on fabric about the atrocities during the Pinochet dictatorship 1973 to 1990. Their non-violent actions contributed significantly to the fall of the regime. By sewing and joining burlap, rags, and scraps of fabric, they gave evidence of their everyday life under the dictatorship and documented state violence and human rights violations. With their arpilleras, women developed an important medium for raising international awareness of the violence and oppression during these times.
The word mola in the language of the Kuna, the indigenous people of Panama, has several meanings. It indicates textile, clothing, decoration for clothing, and a quilt. Molokana are developed in the end of the 19th century and represent one of the backbones of the culture and identity of the Kuna. Mola requires a quite demanding production process and a great precision. The most common decorations are geometric, floral, or represent traditional way of life. The mola from our collection, named a mola for Germany, were made by women from cooperative Mola Yobitibi and was presented at the exhibition The Art of Survival. These women have teamed up in the textile production so that through the skills they possess, they can earn extra money for their families. Production of Molokana plays a major role in traditional art, cultural heritage, protection, and preservation of cultural identity. The popularity of this type of textile is evidenced by many exhibitions in world galleries and museums, and even through existence of specialized Molokana museums.
This is a piece of Vega art from Zimbabwe. Since the late 1980s, a recognized art form of its own in Zimbabwe has emerged from a classic income-generating approach of developing a cooperation for peasant women. The ability to sew and impulses through traditional appliques from Dahomey, Benin, led to a new, amazing art world of the Veya artists. Veya art, whether in bright colors on fabric, as scenic representations, or painted on plywood, tells stories, traditions, myth, marriage, and family problems, everyday life of women, which would have been never told before. It reflects in a unique way reality and imagination of women. The recognition of their art was an important step on the way to self-confidence and awareness of the value of their own culture.
One of the objects from our collections, which was also presented at the exhibition The Art of Survival, was the house we had to live, produced by women from the group Ariadna from Rijeka, Croatia. The Ariadna project was launched by Ute Karlavaris Bremer and in 1993 brought together refugee women from Bosnia. The names of these survival artists, as the author of the project called them, are Hanumica, Soka, Senada, Almaza, Azra, Kadira, Marica, and Khaira. This project enabled the participants to support each other and rebuild their dignity, but also to use their knowledge and skills to make money.
Now we come to an example of our museum. This, for example, is how we try to the stimulation to produce collective art with empowerment and concentration. In 2015, German and refugee women who have no common language started, inspired by our exhibition War Socks and Peacemaker Women, and they created together a quilt, No to War. The presentation in our museum and in others as piece of art and testimony is important on different levels. As empowering process because traditional skills are appreciated. For mutual understanding of the directly involved women. As empowering process because the genuine art piece is worth to be exposed in a museum. And as testimony that serves as a starting point for dialogues with visitors in the museum. In 2019, there was a continuation of this process with some of the women who participated already in 2015 and some new women who gathered in our museum to find something in their life they could agree to. The collective created art pieces are starting points for further conscientization processes for visitors and activities with children we do in our museum.
The communication process in our museum is a permanent crossover of direct and virtual dialogues with women from different periods and different regions of the world, with the aim of discussing the structures behind experience of injustice here and there. How can we find resources for mutual support? How could we build the one world in which we live and which we want to preserve? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. No.
Thank you for this rich presentation and from letting us see the works from all over the world. It was real. What is interesting to me that we already have some team shaping here. Fight for space, for visibility, memory, historical.
I don't know. Would you like to discuss already after our presentation, or would we talk later together?
Yes, we'll talk.
We will talk about this together. This is a kind of summary, and we are introducing our next speaker. Later, we're going to take questions and analyze them. Our next speaker is Slađana Petrović-Varajić. She graduated art history at the Faculty of Philosophy in Belgrade. She holds an MA in Film and Media Studies from the Faculty of Dramatic Arts in Belgrade. She worked as an editor, curator, and manager in the public and independent sector of culture. She is the author and coordinator of several projects of contemporary visual art and films, such as Critics in Action, Photo Documents, Eva Lab, Youth in 60, Idea Not Realized, etc. Slađana is curator and selector for many group and solo exhibitions of national and international artists, as well as a producer of film and video projects. She's a member of national and international associations, ICA, MONS, and Arts Rights Justice. I will be very happy to hear about your work out of Center of Culture within this very centralized circumstances. I hope we hear well now. First, I would like to thank to Dach Theater and all other participants and also organizers and answer and participate in this conference. You actually presented me and gave some insight into my biography. I'm not going to repeat that, but what was a handicap to me is that I came here to speak not about these issues, but based on the fact that I do not have any kind of formal or informal education regarding gender equality, feminism theory, everything about these issues I have actually discussed and learned about by myself. I was thinking what would be the most interesting to hear from me today, to I didn't want to actually give you some information that I have already read by myself. I give you some theoretic issues and topics, especially regarding the fact that I'm not the one who is in theory about female and women empowerment. Of course, I'm not going to retell any kind of details or what has happened during the period from 2015 to 2017 in the Cultural Center in Požega, because everybody knows about that already. I've tried to, in some way, learn about what kind of public speaking I'm holding a kind of political power, in which women and all other people through media, public press conferences, etc., actually give and speak in the sense they actually discriminate the rights of people they are speaking about. I think that it has gender related basis. That's why it is very important to remind everybody about all these issues, because this empowerment is the fact that women's rights are violated. Many women work within these cultural institutions, but statistical numbers and statistical information gives us opposite information, that they are not very introduced in this area. The quota and statistics today in Serbia, which is disputable whether we have democracy here or not, cannot be considered the right conclusion. This is the place where we are speaking about where these issues and conclusions and decisions are brought, and we know this is centralized. These issues women usually are silent about. My colleagues, a large number of them, actually were in situations that they experienced mobbing, especially on the managing positions, but due to the fear not to be excluded from their career path, to violate and jeopardize their personal integrity, they actually were included and involved themselves in stereotypes. This silent decontamination and degradation regarding professional and personal issues of women is very often. Our community is really traditional and neoconservative. We recognize and identify those isogenic ways of communication. The women at managing positions within authorities, and we can identify what has already Milena Dragicevic said, that very usually at managing positions within cultural institutions are posed on that position only during the situations when we speak about critical issues, when we have problems with funding, financing, etc., not within normal situation and everyday situation where I actually identified and recognized my position nowadays. But women usually accept this kind of situation, and cultural institutions mapped themselves on the cultural map of Serbia, and we can say also region as well. But when this change of local authority occurred on the municipality level, had great impact on cultural institution and of course on me, and I was made and forced to dismiss from this position. They had some precise kind of consideration and comments, giving with a clear decision, I'm going to quote this part, that this institution would be closer to public. I can give comment that this is populistic kind of policy, and in this way they violate and jeopardize this cultural institution. Afterwards, I demanded, and I actually decided to fight against all these comments and to defend my colleagues and all the employees within the institution, which actually led us to a great conflict. Nowadays, when we have this kind of hierarchy, within this vertical structure, when you don't obey and you are women, it actually provokes large comments and disagreements. If we speak from the early age, what we are going to read, what we are going to choose, what kind of toys we are going to play with. This is a kind of role that is imposed, starting from her, what she's going to look like, what are the values she's going to have within her personality. The first one and the primary one value which is imposed to women is obedience. The director of a cultural institution actually disobeyed this decision, which she was punished for. It afterwards led in public 5 years ago, when media was more open than today we have the situation here in Serbia. And the representatives of authority actually constructed a kind of construct defining a woman which is going to destroy tradition, to be xenophile, that she is more interested in art than in tradition, and in this sense she should be neglected, she should be disvalued. Those quotations in gallery there are abstract pictures and exhibits which are not understood well. For example, I haven't seen any kind of knitted clothes or something similar, crafts, women crafts, within the museum or any kind of exhibition, but some abstract and senseless pictures. This is a kind of proof that women are within discriminatory environment, and she actually loses this national identity. She is imposed where to sit, where to work, what to do, and this is craft work, then to be at home and not to work. Especially what is important and what was very, very vulgar in this situation is that they were actually put in reality shows. They were related to some kind of sales of bras within cultural institutions like museums. So they actually commented on some program with an embassy in Japan, which was previously done with Japanese embassy, and these Japanese hooks with the tendency led to some bad comments, what the president wanted to say and not the poet itself. When we actually see how they speak, what is the shape and way of communication, the focus is not on this professional work. Actually, they want to show that only tradition is the right way for a woman to go into. A woman, her appearance is a physical object, very often sexual object. We have 2 or 3 days before we had a comment from a Serbian ambassador, Lazansky, when they asked him, how do you see this situation in Serbia that 50% of participants within the government are going to be women? He said that we feel that this is going to be a very nice view because it is always pleasant to see more women than men within some institution. It is not what we have to neglect. We have actually to support all the professional competencies of this woman. So on the local level, they always spoke about the support, the support from the professional side and experts, which I would think at that moment, of course, including the Ministry of Culture, but they actually said that it was not my result of work, but my husband, who is a director at the academy, and he actually started media campaign, which initiated and encouraged the professional side and expert and academia to support me. It is a kind of excluding a woman who is a head of a cultural institution to actually hold all these creative capacities, but if someone stands behind her husband or a lover, she's going to be supported. The main parts from the speaking, which was publicly addressed within this public issues and environment, was very important because within this process I made it be public, and because it was my only encouragement and support. But the other side actually did not support me. Within public, sent actually messages to the public, clear messages to all other women, no matter where she works, not only within culture but generally, that it is not suitable to have critical opinion, to think on his own and give her opinion, because she's going to be punished in this way. Shortly now, within this situation, which is very dramatic, and art in this moment and culture in general is in challenging context. Also, a COVID pandemic crisis as well can be a kind of open window to new considerations, thinking, and what we had before this new normal was not normal. And nobody would like to actually get back to the same situation. Now this is a situation to reconsider everything. And what I think is at this moment critical issue within our country is the status on the field regarding gender equality. Quotes do not mean measures which would be suitable to oppose women on some deciding conditions. What is not what is going to happen, because I think what does it mean that there are 50% of women within the government when we know how the decisions are generally brought? The main way is to be solidar, to gather together, to act jointly, and to regard all those vulnerable groups like artists within associations actually gave this good example as establishing a fund for violated and vulnerable artists, what the culture and art can do is they can support the critical issue, and Virginia Woolf has said, no matter how we act, actually they want to instruct us how to read, how to think, and how to react. And what we have to actually keep is this spirit of freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Slažena. This is a valuable insight into the modern moment, modern problems women, even on positions, have to face. It is very important that you started the public discourse on women that is very problematic in Serbia and worldwide. We should fight from all sides. Very often women who are on the positions, on the governing positions, there are absolutely non-acceptable comments from people with whom I agree politically. So the discourse needs to be righteous from all parties. We always need to talk about how professional somebody is, not about his looks. Let me not forget, it's interesting how in our culture we have the opinion, the dominant opinion, when women is very successful, this is the fruit of her husband, of her lover, and when the gentleman is evil, he's not evil on his own, but it was caused by some Lady Macbeth, some evil woman behind his in person. I'm also the victim of the similar opinion about myself. Thank you very much. Much more themes to discuss for the future discussion. Next speaker will be through the Viber. It's the activist Stasha Zajovic. I'm very sad that she's not today here with us. Her video will inspire different themes. She speaks with the director of the theater, Dijana Milošević, Stasha Zajovic, the feminist and the fighter for peace, will speak. She has organized street actions, worked with refugees, worked against violence, and so on. She initiated several women's networks, like Women's Peace Network, the International Network for Women's Solidarity Against War, Black Women in Black, the Conscientious Objectors and Anti-Militarism in Serbia, the Coalition for a Secular State, etc. She organized a lot of educational activities focusing on women's human rights, women's peace politics, interethnic and intercultural solidarity, women and power. Stasha Zajovic authorized many essays, magazines, and publications on women and politics, publications on reproductive rights, war, nationalism and militarism, and women's resistance to war and anti-militarism. Now please play the video.
First of all, we talked about the term gender equality, and you have your own opinion about that. So would you like to tell us something more about that? First, thank you for the invitation, and I congratulate to the Dach Theater on one of so very important events that they have been continuously organizing for almost 30 years now. I am very sorry that I will not attend this conference in person. The gender equality is one of the most important legacies of the Autonomous Women campaign. Ali nema titla. I'm sorry, we had some technical problems. I'm going to continue with this interview. Stasha has introduced us regarding some issue of gender equality, and she said that the proof of the participation of women in the public sphere is made totally pointless is the Prime Minister Ana Brnabić, who not only showed a cynical and cruel face, but did absolutely nothing for the LGBT community. I could speak much about this, says Stasha. It is absolutely a big step backwards because at the same time in Serbia we have the so-called society festicization. It will directly reflect through what they are forming now. When we spoke about disobedience, actually, Stasha said that disobedience, that's normal, but the poor woman, she said, the slogan of the women in black is always disobedient. So we share the same opinion on this, Stasha, in the work and in the activism of the women in black. Well, yes, some of us, especially me, did not visit the political meetings and youth organizations, but my main place besides the university was the Students' Cultural Center. For me, this was the place of alternative and pluralism, and where I, as the individual, had the right to show my alternative nature in comparison to dominant trends. For me, it was very important that I was very glad that when the Women in Black started, we were in front of the Serbian Cultural Center for half of the year as a symbol for what is called the struggle for the public plurality, the struggle that even when the degree of uniformity and homogenization is very high, so you can say, well, I have the right to exist too, and no matter how minor my opinion and attitudes are and how not important, I will struggle for them. On the other hand, a very interesting question is why are the regime and the dominant culture trends so upset with what a huge culture minority is so persistently struggling for? I mean, not only the women in black, but the dark theater, Shkart, they not only struggle for the space to disclose what is being denied, hidden, like war crimes, but construe a different public that wants to persist even in a very harsh environment. From the very beginning, my friends are Prota and Jola and Vesna, the Shkart people. I think that the art is one of the most important media for changing the world. I'm philologist, so a different profession, but was actually very moved by what writer Tiago Stankovic said. It was only normal when we moved from Serbian Cultural Center. They not only struggle for the space to disclose what is being denied, hidden, like war crimes, but construe a different public that wants to persist even in a very harsh environment. From the very beginning, my friends, Prota, Jola and Vesna, the Shkart people, I think that art is one of the most important media for changing the world. I'm a philologist, so a different profession, but was actually very moved by what the writer Tiago Stankovic said. And many women remembered this, that during Corona we could live without the trucks and trains, without many needs that maybe are luxury, but we cannot live without reading books, without dedicating ourselves to culture. I don't know whether there is anyone who did not watch that Bocelli in front of the Milan Cathedral when they say people need turbo folk. No, you don't need turbo folk. People need something much more sophisticated. Actually, it was very normal when we moved from Serbian Cultural Center. It was a very important point. How can you, who are struggling against the mainstream, against any type of consensus, the cultural, the national, everything, place yourself in the point that expresses a national spirit? the National Theatre on the one side, the National Museum on the other, and you struggling exactly on that location. It was a challenge. Together with you to take possession of, to occupy such a space for the expression of an alternative opinion. You remember when we were with Cassandra and said something like, we rebel, strangers among our own people who are against war, nationalism, we also have the right. It is also our square, and expressed that this was the place where we would fight, and it was a challenge. I also might say that women in black had their voice, the body language, their silence actually speaks. They present a cry. That is what we specially designed for our activities. Thanks to Skart, Dach Theater, of course, and art clinics, which have been with us from the beginning, continually solidary. What do you think? What is the power of the art practice in association with activism to cause strong reactions? We have realized together numerous performances, etc. Yes. Do you remember when we in ex-Yugoslavia performed a play Crossing the Line? Yes, that's right. This performance based on the book you published, Female Side of the War. During the time we performed that play, we received lots of threats. I remember that we were several times secured by the police. You also had some... We already have 13 lawsuits ongoing. Then I remember the performances we realized together in Knez Mikhailova Street about the bombing in 1999, where we presented that during the bombing the citizens of Kosovo died, which obviously was not an issue to speak in public, which led to death threats I am going to mention. So what does the art provoke in association with a clear idea, of course, to cause such violent reactions? I don't know whether I can express, but I ask myself always during the tough times what the role of the art is, whether to express what is already known, or do they know what really happened in Srebrenica? It turns out that everybody knows, but disclosing the fact that we all are familiar with disturbs us, and then those who dare disclose it publicly should be actually punished. But we speak what we know. You all know it, but I'm the one to tell it aloud, in public and literally. Let's say that this way we disclose what happened in our name. They killed in our name, only 100 kilometers away. And we all know about that. That is the way of those who decide to speak about it should be punished, since they actually disclose a crime. They undertake the responsibility, those who decided to disclose the truth. It would be really great if it had happened. Actually, it would be great if it had been politicized and it did not have anything to do with the reality. But the reality makes us responsible, since we find inspiration in the reality, Dach Theater, etc. We do not only disclose, we search and find that there is a vast amount of creativity and energy, especially with women, but of course men, who had already experienced this. I quite often work on the field with women from the eastern Bosnia. What they say, why do you need to go to Belgrade? They say to watch the theater performances. It is the deepest human need. A lot of things connect us with Skart and Dach. But what I would highlight is the solidarity with disempowered, oppressed, with alterity we connect with. For example, Why Belgrade ceased to be considered a city anymore? In my opinion, Belgrade ceased to be considered a city anymore when it stopped respecting alterity. The city are not buildings like Belgrade's waterfront. A city is a place with layers, cultural, ethnical, racial layers. So such place cannot be reduced to only gender dimension, because we cannot make it without class, racial, ethical, cultural, sex dimension, and so on. We discover those layers. Why the plurality presents such a threat? It is, in my opinion, very simple to explain because, for example, it is not unusual that Dobrica Ćosić, for example, went to attend the opening of the Jušće shopping mall. Such national identity, patriotic narrations, it is a cemented war profitability in association with the oligarchy, which I think is unfortunately our reality. That is why, for them, the most critical threat is art, as well as those who dare speak in public and in a clear way about what was happening in our name, and those who not only speak about evil, but the relations among powers, between powers, the relation between the rich and the poor, between men and women, all those levels which are very, very important. The multi-layers and complexity of the reality around us, but the reality is not only grim. We also fight for some of our principles as well. Thanks to this, inspire us to fight for the principles as well. Thanks to mutual collaboration, solidarity, we do nice things, exactly those things, unconditionally, which is very important. We, Skart Dach Theatre, we do not prescribe conditions. It does not mean that we do not need any funds, but nobody imposes anything to us. We are not led by bond tendencies on the market, for example, but what the reality makes us responsible to speak about. Thanks a lot, Stasha. It has been great pleasure to listen to you, and we are glad that you are present at this conference in this way. Okay, I hope I will come on 27, but I need to visit many places. I have some visits in Kotor with my friends and other places in Leskovac, in Sanjak. So, okay, thank you again and goodbye. Ovo nisu isekli, trebalo bi seku.
Thank you, Stasha, and to Diana for a fantastic discourse. The themes are repeating. We have the idea that many changes are on the cosmetic level. The gender equality, one of the central problems of the modern societies, but the solutions are cosmetic and do not change the position of the women. Essentially, there is the fight for the public space. Sometimes when we are exposed from the public space, we have to create them on our own, like the squares, the museums, as we saw in Gabi and Ivana. Also the theme of obedience and disobedience. The most dangerous woman is disobedient woman. I'm very glad that Stasha introduced the issue of classes and the intersectionality. So this is the idea that we cannot, it is very dangerous to isolate the gender equality from other categories of every person's complex identity, whether it is the question of the class, the races. It is not the same to be the poor and the rich woman without rights. We will speak about that more in our discourse, but these are the themes. The next will be Hope Azeta. from Rwanda through the Zoom. She's the founder, artistic director of Mashirika Performing Arts and Media Company, a leading theater company in Rwanda. She's also the curator of Ubuntu Arts Festival. She directed the Africa's Hope production that was performed in Kigali, the 10th anniversary commemoration of genocide, and then of G8 World Summit in Edinburgh in 2008. Then she directed Shadows of Memory for the 20th genocide commemoration. She has been an artist in residence at the Institute of the Arts and Civic Dialogue in Cambridge, an alumna of Brown University International Advanced Research Institute, and a member of the Lincoln Center Theatre Directors Lab, and a fellow of Africa's Leadership Initiative. Hope was also the member of the. Welcome, Hope, and we are so happy that you are here, if only virtually. Wherever you are ready, you can start.
Thank you so very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be part of this special women I'm seeing and following their work. What a great space to be. Yes, like my predecessor said before, I'm not a trained gender equality specialist or of any scholar of any kind. And I have come to learn that art is an encounter, and so is life. And so is life. So it's in that regard that because of my nature as a woman, I have become a great student of this school called life, very faithful, and just that voice in me, or that eye in me that was inborn, just to look at gaps in communities or societies, and I try to respond. So I decided not to share a lot of like visuals and things because Zoom has been such a headache when it comes to visuals and videos, and that's what I'm learning in 2020. So I'll straight away go back that before the 1994 Rwandan genocide against the Tutsi, the art scene was really dominated by men. They're the ones who wrote the scripts, they're the ones who created music, they're the ones who did that. But when the war came in, so many men got involved in the war, and women, as always, and children were just the biggest victims of this kind of history. So I was born and raised as a refugee in Uganda. Then I returned to Rwanda after 1995. And around 2000 is when I settled back. But after the 1994 genocide, it just worked out that during the war, women were the ones who are, they are part of the war as well. You would find a woman holding a gun and a baby, but also creating music to create some space of breath during the war. So after the war, there was a lot of music for healing, and the music that helped the country get up was really composed by women. So in the art scene also, I came on board with my two other fellows. We started creating a vibrant theater scene. Because when I returned to Rwanda, there was not much theater scene, there was more radio drama. Yeah. So there was more radio drama. And then, so in my background as well in the university, I specialized in theater for development. And in this course, we are trained to look at gaps in communities and respond towards these gaps. So I returned to Rwanda and I found so many things happening. It's not the paradise I'd expected. It was just a country rising from ashes. So like a phoenix, of course, a woman is always like there to just, clean up the mess. When a party happens in our homes, it is always a woman who comes to clean it up. It's always women who clean up the mess in the house. So I started using art as a tool for social transformation, and we're dealing with very intensive subjects like reconciliation, forgiveness and justice, very complicated things. So that has been really, really my journey over the course of 20 years. And that's what I've been creating these kind of performances. But I say women have played a very big role in helping Rwanda become where it is. In most institutions, they are led by women, but also the government has been pushing the role of women and supporting women. We have the biggest percentage in our parliament. We have 55% or so are women in the parliament. So that shows you the will on the ground to empower women with these kind of skills. So that has really been our time in place. So in 2015, I was approached by Africa Leadership Initiative. They said, Hope, you have created performances like you had in my bio. I have done really huge performances, stadium performances of 1,000 people, a cast performing in front of, 30,000 or so people, but most intently about trying to commemorate our past and how we can use our past to define the future. So in 2015, I was approached by this organization to step from success to significance, because I had done performances and the world had gone, wow, wow, wow. But I was challenged and I was asked, what are you doing to leave a legacy behind? What are you doing as a woman to leave what you're doing right now behind? So I started working on this space at the Kigali Genocide Memorial, where you have about 300,000 victims buried, victims of the Rwandan 1994 genocide. So I started this space so that I can showcase the kind of works I was doing. So in that space, there is an amphitheater and it sits about 2,000 people. So when I started that, people are like, Hope, are you crazy? You cannot do a festival in this kind of space. And I was like, if I don't do work in this kind of space, then where do I do it? This is the conversation I want. We have lost faith in humanity. What are we doing to bring back humanity? We have lost empathy as human beings. What are we doing to bring it back? That's an instinct of a woman, But at the same time, for me, I was really worried about the gap of lack of communication or lack of the right conversations. So I was questioning, I was traveling around the world and I was hit by the fact that, we are still doing art for art's sake, an art piece that where people just go, wow, and they just walk home. Can we create work that can make people just keep quiet and walk home in silence and think about that subject? Because the stories of crimes against humanity, we don't have enough words to express this. So the festival I created, Ubumunu Arts Festival, Ubumunu means being human, started off questioning, what is a human being? What does it mean to be human? Is it to just sit and watch your neighbor's house on fire and you just sit back? Is it just a me, myself, and I kind of world? What is to be human? What is a human being? Because we see every day people feeding hate to children, feeding them with prejudice. And then this hate comes and plants roots in our hearts. And when it plants roots in our hearts, it grows into this big evil. And then we start worshiping this hate that becomes a king in our hearts. And before we know, the world has caught fire. So if my world caught fire, what are we learning from this history? So I started this festival so people can learn from history. I was like, let's use the Rwandan backdrop, because genocide is not a Rwandan war. It's not a Rwandan problem. It's not a Rwandan evil. It's a global evil. It's our evil. So if my story can become our story, then that is the circle I want to be part of. I want to be part of that conversation. So over the course of 6 years, we have had over 50 countries come to this space. And again, I'm always taking these risks. I'm not a professional festival curator. I'm not a professional anything to do with event organization. I organize this festival the way I would do my play. I write the theme, I write the play, and direct that play. That's how I look at the festival. So the festival is just like a performance. It's curated like that. Every year we have a theme to talk about. So this year's theme focused on breathe, because last year, as we were finishing the festival, whose theme was barriers, borders, and obstacles, I was asking myself, what's going to be the theme for 2020? And I was just looking at how young people are losing breath. You're just, dying of mental health issues. And I was like, we need to stop as a human race. We need to stop. We just need to stop for a while and recharge our souls. And this was also my frustration out of the performances I was looking at in my own neighborhood. I was like, I'm looking at a performance and I don't feel sore. Nothing is stabbing me. Nothing is holding me tight. So this space was purely a reflection of the kind of performances I do, which are about social issues affecting humanity. So this year is when it dawned on me that what we do right now is actually the future. I had no clue that this year we would see a revolution in America where people are crying, I can't breathe. I had no clue that the world was going to be wearing masks, because we have, we can all breathe. We all need to breathe to qualify as human beings. You need to breathe. So I was very skeptical, but it was a great learning experience as well, that women have the power. Women have the capacity to feel things and respond. And that's what makes me feel very happy this morning, listening to each woman out there in different parts of the world, sharing their work. We're all trying to create a world where we can live, but most importantly, a world where our children or children of tomorrow will live. And for me, this is what makes me think that actually there's no such a thing like the future. The future is right now. So now is the future for a woman to be empowered, to be given this space, because I always wonder why when women always come after the storms have burst, after the volcano has passed, is when women come on board, because we care. We care because it takes us 9 months to carry a baby in our stomachs, and it takes 20 years to grow them into a man. But it only takes 20 seconds of war to destroy this man. So, in due respect, it's just a natural fitting that this is our call as women, to create art for humanities. Thank you so much. I would rather have questions than talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Hope. Congratulations on your wonderful festival, and also that you brought up the notion of women cleaning up the mess. After the war and the guys cooked it all up, there were many women came together to clean up the mess. Also, bringing up the notion of learning from history brings this idea back that we need to reclaim the history. Now we will open a discussion. Can I ask the speakers to come back to join me here? I will ask some questions initially. The audience can also participate with questions, with comments, and our panelists will answer. What is interesting to me, thinking about the history of the feminist moves and the female rights, the rights of minorities in general, a few of us mentioned it. This is the return to the tradition And we have the situation not only in Serbia but worldwide that the right party is gaining strength, and the discourse, anti-feminist discourse as well. By lecturing in America, most of my pupils thinks about the feminism as of a new word. The young people refuse to declare as feminists. Maybe my first question would be how to take over the feminism as a positive value again. How? What we talked about, we said solidarity. I absolutely agree. I think that solidarity is key. But one of the challenges to speak about is how to cherish the solidarity towards the women who think differently than we do. How to include the anti-feminists in our movement. More often and often, women refuse to call themselves feminists, and they think that it is insulting, and they insult the women who call themselves the feminists. Please speak to us more about this situation and tell us how to regain the positive value of feminism, something to be followed by majority of women. I think that actually it is very difficult because it is difficult for me not to be ironic when I see, for example, a movie done by somebody coming from the environment that is close to myself, from his wedding started with a professional makeup. That is difficult for me. It is difficult for me not to be ironic, not to make comment to what measure in my time this would be peasantry. And today it is a norm, it is a value. So I resist this impulse. I think that we as feminists know how to be stubborn sometimes. We think that our values are righteous every time. Maybe some things that are not so important. They are symptomatic but not important. We should leave them aside and spur what is for our students today important, the things that are key, that they will feel as negative on their own skin. So to show the misogynous feeling as much as we can. This is the paradox. Marina Blagojević, who unfortunately deceased, left us not so long ago. She wrote 2 books on misogynia with numerous researches. This is the least cited and read books even in the scientific world, and that's interesting. Why some other books? For example, from my works, the text on misogyny in media is least cited text. I think it's not cited at all, actually. Nobody read it, although it's available on the website. So people are not aware, actually, to what level misogyny became standard. What you said at the beginning, how much we ourselves, our people who think similarly in the ideological terms, they do not refrain from showing misogyny when there is somebody who do not think in the same terms as we do. That's most important, to discover the misogyny, to uncover it. The patronizing view of the male towards female, to insist that we must not accept it, even if sometimes it can lead us to opposition. So the big tata slap on your back and say, okay, you were obedient and good, now I will give you the higher position, you can advance, you can get a political function, depending. So such things must be uncovered. If we are positioned like this, we will be relieved from the position in the same way. So against the patronization, the male patronization, against the misogyny, that is obvious to us that are educated independently educated, because I have learned on my own in this field, in this discipline. This was not at our faculty, offered at our faculty. Slajan also studied with me. This was not the theme at that point of time as well. Also the women who could in the female studies, in some more serious faculties with this kind of subjects, they had the opportunity to learn it there. It is one of the major obligations not to struggle in the unimportant fights with some elements that are traditional female role, that are today at the price, that are today valued. It's not important whether somebody will wear the white dress or not at their wedding. Let us fight essentially important struggles. So we have much problems. I don't know what to set aside as a priority. I think that actually it's evident, not my impression. We live in a time of the absolute deconstruction of authorities of knowledge, digitalization of social networks, and the incredible fast flow of information actually made that anything at all. COVID, for example, we have different centers sending opposite information, and everybody has somebody somewhere and somebody else to believe to. Everything is under question mark, and in a way, I see ethics first. Ethics is the priority in the studies of the gender, the issue of gender equality. Ethics may come from science and from arts. So according to me, key are education and art that best has most capacities and potentials to spur the critical opinion. What Stasha spoke about, we actually live in a reality where our authoritarian regimes manage to all the values that we defined as important parameters that we read through such values, how they are present in, how much they are present in our society, to turn them around and to show them in the opposite light, to seem as if they were satisfied, but essentially they mean nothing. Actually, they mean exactly opposite what she said. The women who are at today government positions and they come from governing parties are the soldiers that run against other women who think differently. Of course, major role in this is taken by the media. For me, it is questionable from which side to approach, but I think that through various artistic projects, formal or non-formal kinds of education, different studies, such as, I forgot the name of the author, who analyzed the books that must be read in school, that the obligatory books and the way how they study the gender, it is gender discriminating. Such obligatory books are gender discriminating. So how to influence the young through the education, through art, that's something to think about. Thank you, Slačana. So we struggle in the fights that we did not expect to fight in 2020. We thought that the reproductive rights were rounded off in 1960s, but they were not rounded off. Obviously, the misogynic society manages to return us 2 steps back, and we need to find the strategies to go ahead. Please, our participants through the Zoom, I would ask them if they have something to share with us about how they see the current situation, how to solidarize with those who think differently, how to call them to fight for their own rights, not against those rights. Any strategy, if you have successful examples from the past, if you have ideas for the future also to share with us. Do you have anything to say to us? Hope, Tiana, Gabi?
Yes. I am thinking about first, what is feminism? And for me, it's not more than struggling for equal rights for everybody, for girls, for boys, for men, for women. We want the equal rights economically, politically, in the rights, in the law. And our museum, we have the approach to their mind that women have a voice and they have a lot of merits within this society, and we bring the women their stories and to have a face that what they did in the history for a better society, what they do all the days to get a better society. So I think the situation that now we have this backlash tells us that the struggle is still going. We have to go on with this struggle. And if young women think, for example, they have a good education now, they can go to school in a lot of, not everywhere, but a lot of the girls, for example, my students, they say we have everything we want. Then we have to think about what happens if they have 2 children and no possibility to take care of them without any help of the state and so on. So I think we have to make women and their merits and their possibilities visible. That's our task in the museum.
I would like also to add something. We need feminism nowadays as in the past, especially because today are some rights that women gained in the past. We have to regain them now, especially, for example, reproductive rights or abortion rights. You can see the situation in some countries in Europe where women nowadays don't have legally approach to legal abortion. And in Serbian society, I can now speak from my side because I come from Serbia. And I know that feminism has really negative picture nowadays. And in the context of that feminism fight against something, but it is not like that. Feminism is fight for something, for women's rights, for women health rights, for women education. It was in the past so, and unfortunately we have to regain some of those rights nowadays too.
Yeah, and I also think it's just the tone upon which the fight has been approached. You know, I think to win your enemy, you need to love them. But if we come out as angry women who just want to fight, then people won't take it. I think we have to keep fighting our fight, our good fight. But it's the approach, I think, that becomes so aggressive, and then people just back off. Because already women, we have a natural, we are like spirits, we are like queens, we are like, you know, queens of existence. So I think it's just how the approach is being handled that people end up backing off, and they just don't want to listen. If you want to change something, you're going to take a low tone, but that is consistent and just the same consistency, I think, is really key. But not to show up like somebody who has come up with all sorts of guns and with folded sleeves. I think the aggressiveness of the nature is what is making people make feminism look like a fight, but it's not a fight. It's just the tone we need to work on and the approach.
Thank you, Hope. For me, it seems like that. Sorry, mogu na srpskom. For me, it seems that it's not necessary. Maybe it's the first wave of feminism with a fighting note. The subsequent waves had some different strategies, but we encountered the resistance. That is because most probably we won some battles, and now they want to return us to the starting point. It is interesting for me. I have been teaching on the global course for the mediators in the local conflicts worldwide for the United Nations. And I was asked, especially first time, to enter to include a gender perspective in the local conflicts. I thought that it was good to start with the statistical data, not immediately with the problem of rape and the trauma, subsequent trauma, how the mediators must not use it for the bad purpose, how the attendance was worldwide from the North America through Japan and Africa. Most of them works in Africa because there are most local conflicts about which we don't know anything. Who cares for the local wars somewhere around the world? I thought I should give some examples not linked locally to Africa and to Balkans, but data on the women position in Japan. I presented the world statistics on the countries with the major discrepancy in the property of men and women. First is Japan on the list, and only then, very interesting, some countries where we would think woman is on the very good position, the property status is relatively leveled up. In the end, the discussion was attended by the Japan woman who was insulted by this. She says, what is the property status? Why is the property status of men and women important? Why do you highlight this? Why is that important? On the one hand, I knew what she wanted to say. Japan is always important and positive example in all international courses of the demilitarization of the company, of the building of the pleasant society. But I need to say that they disregard the misogyny that exists in the Japan society, because this theme nobody wants to trigger. They don't want to speak about the misogyny that exists in some countries of the global north, the so-called global north. So we see here how much the hypocrisy exists even in the societies fighting for the human rights. If we would say whether human rights are realized in Japan, I think that 90% of people would say yes. And there we have two cases. And that's why I agree with the colleague who said at the beginning that we need to struggle for all human rights. The people living on Okinawa, you all know about the Okinawa, maybe you have never asked yourselves why Japan is not against the raping of the American soldiers on Okinawa, because the citizens on Okinawa are not Japanese. They are the ethical group of another race that only recently received the university. That is why they gave Okinawa to Americans. They murdered the inhabitants, both Japanese and the Americans, when they fought for Okinawa, because for the Japanese they were potential traitors, and for the Americans they were the Japanese. In the same way as they treat the Okinawa inhabitants, they treat their women. The women are not present academically. The first women that we met and women conferences, worldwide conferences, was the professor soprano of singing, the professor of singing, of the soprano singing, who could have been identified as the employed professor on the university in Japan, and the Chinese asked her to come, the Chinese organizers. This is not going off the theme from my side. I want to say that we have many problems linked not only for the vulnerable groups, for the migrant women, but also for at the first glance, rich and powerful women in Saudi Arabia and Japan and so on, and on whom nobody takes care because they are rich according to their husbands, not in Japan, and not only in person, in Japan as well. I think that we should use statistical data. We lack this. We still use more the emotion, the talk. The talk is easy to remember. Talks light a fire in our hearts and so on. But I think that we should be using data on the level of employment, on the level of good employment, on the level of property, and on the level of achieving the rights on courts of justice and so on. There is a lot of things to be used by us.
It can be shocking when we say, what do we need feminism for? We are great, we have great life, but only a slight % of property is in the ownership of women. If you think so, then go ahead. But actually, you have to know that the fight is elementary in some areas, and which is very important. I suggest to talk about this kind of two-sided, from two aspects, issues, to go out of these cosmetic changes. We have recently heard that gender studies in America were financed by the government just to attract, to draw attention from the classes. It was used as the weapon to fight against communism. The root and the stem of this gender issue actually brought us to the conclusion that it has few layers to discuss. Within the Ministry of Human Rights and Equality, we are going to have discussions on these topics, but in reality we're going to see how it is going to be realized. Now we come to talk about actually direct talks to reality, not to make these cosmetic changes or some other things. So these strategies regarding these issues are welcome here. I'm going to have a short talk about this regarding this statistical data regarding women on the leading positions, leading women participating and members of boards, various boards within cultural institutions, for cultural communication and other governmental bodies. We actually thought to make a kind of essay or analysis in Serbia. A video series was planned to be carried out because there are women on these positions, but equally men and women are not formulated, defined by the law in the same way. So the law on culture defines differently who is the one who, with his own capacities and his own professional attitudes and competencies, can be on this place. So we have to actually discuss about the content. We need to match and to watch in this multisectoral and intersectoral way, to see from many sides what is the percentage which is going to be suitable to include within a legal framework to define precisely. I would like to add, you have read the opinions of our government regarding the happenings in Old Capitania. They say that the right side actually torn out the works of underground artists. If you have read what the ministry said, and after that the accusations and comments of the ministry and other colleagues, you could conclude that they spoke in the same language. All those talks and communications were actually written by one person. The formulations, the context, the content, the terms used, we can conclude that the present minister actually wrote all of them. Then he insisted that afterwards, after he wrote it, he insisted that other people signed all these communications. I think that it is very sad. We can say that man can actually defended himself because he didn't want to sign the communication, the decision written by another man, but a woman couldn't resist this. She had to sign it because she was the language. The woman that read this and signed this decision actually had to accept it because she is a woman. The obedience she is imposed to hold and to accept is the thing that stopped her from refusing to sign this kind of explanation and communication. Unfortunately, women are still in this kind of position, lower position, because they have been brought from the early age to obey and to be obedient. This is what we should disclose. All these situations, even they are so embarrassing for those who live in very small local societies. It is a very embarrassing situation and very, sensitive situation, because they need to disclose this thing in the name, like the woman actually said, no matter, regardless, a man is behind all those words. What I also comment is that he actually could have written it in some kind of normal, some neutral way of language, not using this man-like language and communication. Maybe this is what we should not demonstrate, the woman who signed, but the man who wrote the text. So maybe this is what we have to pay attention to. Just like we have the examples of women being obedient, we also have examples of women not being obedient, to disobey, and in that way trying to realize their rights. So please, if someone has a kind of comment to give us regarding this segment of conversation, imposing obedience to women.
One nas čuju, ja pretpostavljam dobro. Da, dobro.
Okay. So no questions?
In our museum, we try to show this disobedient women. We show that women always had a voice, and we make them listen to. So I think it's sad, and how could I say? we don't want to show the side we always had to suffer, and we are on the black side of the history, or the hidden side of the history. We say we can do something, we always did something, and we make us listen to. And that's our approach to overcome these gender gaps wherever you look at, economically or in the cultural life or something.
I think also, if we need to see change, we are going to have to change ourselves first, because we cannot give what we don't have. If you have internal battles and you're passing them on, definitely that's the energy you'll get back. So we need to have a sound mind. First, checking ourselves. How is it happening in me? Because you'll find that also women, we play a big role in how we transmit communication on our own children. You know, we have to be, when they don't want to eat vegetables or carrots, we look for a way, we mash them into some nice juice. So we need to be very sensitive about how we communicate things, and not come out as, you know, another battlefield, creating a battlefield within a battlefield. You know, you have to go different directions. So we need to do a past self. We need to pay a visit in our internal space first. And then we look for a way of making change, but we need to change fast.
No, I would also like to add something. So we spoke about statistic, and I would like to give a comment from the perspective of my topic, what is really interesting for me. So the presence of women, historical women in public space. And I did research in Firth, where is our museum situated, and in Novi Sad, in my hometown. So I noticed that, for example, in Novi Sad, there are about 900 streets, and only 46 are dedicated to women. The same situation is also in Firth. But I noticed that also in Firth, as in Novi Sad, the women organizations are giving suggestions for some new women's name in public space, and it is really successful.
Thank you.
I would like now to open the opportunity so that the audience and participants can make questions or give comments, maybe present some positive sides of their strategies that they have already used, or whatever they were inspired during this conversation. It seems to me that even there is some sense not to confront always, not to fight each fight. We do not need to actually accept only this decent way of communication and fight. I understand my colleague from Rwanda. We should not give a kind of direct and violent fight. You should always be decent, kind within communication. This is also a kind of limiting situation within our education. I think that we should not limit within this patriarch-related and man-like society we live in. So the question is, how can we put on our side those who are against us? The most of people have this kind of neutral opinion. They're not informed. They do not have a kind of opinion. Young people are included within activists. Most of them do not have any kind of attitude, any kind of role model, and this is the problem. No matter how active they are, they generally come with no conclusion of what their idea is. When I speak about those who are on the same side with us, but also those who are against or on some other side, many silent people are around us and they do not see themselves as target groups, and that's the problem. I think that politically correct communication is not a cosmetics. I understand that sometimes we have some more urgent and prioritized battles to fight, but numerous authors, female women authors, actually prove through their work and give models and reflect this performing character of this kind of communication. So I consider them very legitimate. I do not agree with Slađana that quotes are not important. Despite statistics can be challenging, and it can women within government, the number of women in the government cannot be satisfying, and it looks like a mask. It doesn't mean that in future, in long terms, we are not going to have some changes in the sense that more women are going to be included. What is a kind of obstacle is that people who are against this make it more difficult at this moment. I'm very interested in the research of Tiana's research, and I'm going to find out more about this topic because I'm very curious and I find it very interesting, and think that on local level we should do more research like that. I know that Professor Šešić also did some kind of local research within communities, and maybe if we do it as well, we would contribute in this way and to a kind of encourage women which contributed to local communities to give their opinion and experience. The festival program is excellent, and I appreciate that DACH actually realized it, no matter what present status quo is regarding this pandemic situation. Agata, I would like to offer the opportunity that I just want to correct that political communication is not the cosmetics, but I also wanted to highlight that some changes that we have are cosmetic changes, not real one. Maybe I did not give quotes are not nonsense. I just I just said in the aspect that Požega is a very small community and very small town, and I discussed from this aspect. I just think that it is not a realistic indicator of what the situation in our country is, and until we have democracy back in our society on the level of parliamentarism and institutions which really do their job, we are not going to have real changes. Some of the parameters that got final conclusions at the court, for example, my case, and got this final decision, but what we got is liquidation of the whole institution, where 4 women were dismissed. Of course, male colleagues as well. At that moment, we didn't consider even the situation that this institution would be in liquidation. In that sense, we didn't think of those people also who were short, and they lacked this kind of communication art and everything. So they were also a kind of collateral damage. And this is why I think that quotes are not so important, but gender-sensitive issues as well.
Agata.
Thank you, Agata Milan-Đurić. I am very glad that the first part of the expose of my Professor Milana Dragičević-Šešić Yes, thank you very much. I actually have the impression that I'm the feminist from the young age, but there are various kinds of feminisms, and most various discourses and approaches regarding the realization of the rights of minorities. Women are the primary minority with regard to the distribution of the power worldwide. We mentioned I have a lot of themes on which I would like to talk, but I hope that I will be able to cover something in my expose, although I have trouble with hurt in my back, discus hernia and so on. Hopefully it will not affect my concentration. What I wanted to say is that I am fighting for what is very important and revolutionary, the motto of the feminist move, especially of the women that are multiply exposed to violence, that is the black and brown women in America, for whom I think may be the source, one of the source of the feminist move, the empathy of revolution. Many research have shown, in addition to the catastrophic 2 seconds statistics, that every 2 seconds one woman is murdered or raped in the world. What was lacking in my personal history, in the development and the studies at the drama faculty, in the queer studies, in female studies, what is lacking is the perception that Diana mentioned, the intersectionality. There are various feminisms. What somebody would say, somebody think that Marx is problematic, but he would say, let 1,000 flowers bloom. What is the dominant mainstream feministic analysis, feministical approach regarding the gender is actually the disregard of the intersectional prism that was present in the first wave of feminism when women, the Hispanic women, black women, were totally stepped over. I was present and I worked much with the African women and with persons who do not come under the gender binary matrix. We concluded in the conference, although most of them were identified as the intersex, as queer women, as trans women, and the very important Black Lives Matters move was initiated by the queer black women, the women that rationalize the American context, that whether we would like it or not, has strong impact, because America is culturally, politically one of the countries that has the biggest impact on the rest of the world. However, this is the total disregard towards the trans women. If you are a trans woman, if you are a gypsy, if you are a sexual worker, if you are a person with a disability, this perspective is, and I saw it, I worked with it. It was a big step to work for the institution of the Republic Ombudsman for the gender analysis, how much they exclude these minor categories. Now a digression. I follow up on the presence of women. Also the LGBTQ plus persons, I don't believe in the racism, I believe in the races, I believe in various colors of skin. Gina Davis, the American Institute for the Analysis of the Presence of Genders in the film, in the media, she implements 6 categories, and the results today are very disappointing. What Professor Dragicevic said during our studies when he spoke about the mass culture, that is very important for the purpose of representation. If you can see it, you can be it. When I was growing up, there weren't any persons like me in any sphere at all. during the researches GET and Labris and other organizations organized, when you analyze the books, obligatory books in secondary schools, in universities, the people who belong to the so-called, whatever it means, to the different orientation, the sexual or other orientation, but the identities are various, the identities are diverse. I have insisted on the gender for years now, not too much original or progressive. There are many colleagues of mine, but finally it has been accepted. This diversity, the gender diversity, has becoming accepted. The dimensions, the intersexual dimensions are accepted finally. There are various feminisms, like Germaine Greed, Sheila Jeffries, who are leading feminists, and often me and my colleagues also socialize with these radical feminists of our own in our country. There are women on powerful positions in the society. There was an exquisite show with international award. It is very authentic. It is acted in by the authentic persons, two gypsy women, trans women, who were engaged in sexual work, were very poor as a consequence of multiple discrimination and multiple violence that affects many persons because they are women simply, and so on. So there is a very complex dynamic procedures that are taboo, that need to be included and opened in the public discourse, starting from the persons, let us say women and persons, non-binary persons in gender terms. Mass culture is very important. If I did not see David Bowie in my young days, who crashed away, or Annie Lennox, this gender matrix, I would feel that I was alone in the world. Natalie Portman, famous actress, who also deals in translation, writing, it's all interlinked. She also deals in environmental protection. She wrote the archetype stories, the Three Pigs and some other fairy tales, the book of fairy tales. That's the internalization, introjection of our basic scripts, based on which we develop later on. She did the feminist revision of these fairy tales. She introduced the non-binary person among the fairy tale persons. The gender is the specter, and this perspective is lacking in this context. The subversive, very important, in terms of Serbia, I'm vulnerable to talk about my work, and I have problem with speaking, with highlighting myself. Perhaps the film will be available while I'm speaking or not, whatever. So subversive, artistic subversive group, or we as individuals, when we passed through the official academic institutions, academics and alternative institutions that I completed, the queer studies, the female studies, you are, as Monique Witty would say, totally in a country without languages. The analysis of history, the analysis of obligatory literature, the psychology, the art analysis, as if the person's LGBTIQ identities, with all other categories creating the multiple discrimination, they are totally invisible. I have grown up in the country without any languages. In the cooperation with all other moments, I'm very happy that I saw Protaškart, with whom I organized something, some project, or Stasha Gavic, or some other people. But this is a perspective that is very necessary. With regard to the strategy, I can talk a lot, but I would not take off much of your time. when we should overcome the obstacles, the social obstacles, Jane Fonda, Maya Angelou, and some other mothers would say that the empathy is one of the most powerful means in cooperation with other political and other strategies, but the perspective on which I would insist by all means. Thank you.
Thank you, Agata. This is very interesting because during this festival, every day during the various debates and discussions, we have a term careness, care, to care, the strategy of empathy and care. I'm talking about international discourse, which has become very important within this contemporary perception and perceiving of social communication and relations. I'm interested now, what are the strategies to introduce the strategy of care into the change within the society metrics, society relations, social institutions. I don't expect it I don't expect a kind of final decision and answer, but I ask you to think about that and give your opinion. Listening to Milan, I sincerely has not been in the situation until 3 years ago to think about gender aspect. I'm illiterate in this sense. One of my colleagues here, you already know, Alexander Bertic, he is a professor at Goldsmith University, and he gets the education how to observe those students, how not to binary classify them, how to approach them, how to see them. But we here haven't had that kind of education. This is why I actually wanted to say something about this. The whole educational system should have been re-educated, the media system, everything should be revised, and especially all of us who work in public sector, public communications. Just like we have educated ourselves regarding gender rights, human rights, or similar things, this is the way how we should be educated in this way, because even in our primary schools, we didn't have this kind of information or context to speak and be educated about. So I don't know how to realize it, but maybe through the Ministry for Dialogue, maybe this is the point where should it be revised. I think that we should start from the education system, beginning, of course, with the school books. I have never been in a situation to find a role model to identify with. And in this sense, in David Bowie, Lennox, or similar, we had that kind of models in front of us, but did not consider them as role models. So we should enable that persons who we cannot easily put in binary way to some class should be included in within education system. The history of art maybe should be revised from this aspect and include these issues and that kind of role models. But unfortunately, we haven't realized yet these women and their place in art, and not to talk about gender issues, gender equalities. But I think we should put it as an issue to discuss. Then we can speak about solidarity, which should be included in all kinds of groups which we mind it in a kind of peasantry position. And I think that this is something which is a part of the fear nowadays. I'm sorry. Gender is spectre, sexuality is a spectre. For example, when the Prime Minister speaks about LGBT population, they actually think of lesbian population. They don't know what they are talking. They don't know what intersex women are, what queer persons are. There's a diversity of identities they actually don't know about. Like Judith Butler is a leading theoretical, she's a gender performer. She speaks about repeating this kind of performances, and she is the one who speaks that gender has this kind of performing qualities. Gender is the spectrum we can speak about a lot in diverse ways, but when we speak about academic studies, the public discourse, which is becoming more open in the world as well, at the African conferences, I experienced that those most gatekeepers of feminists are actually feminist women, which the colleague from Rwanda said that the activism is very important, no matter in what kind of stream. It is connected to work on yourself, to become aware, to actually introduce and transphobia, misogynia, and everything which is inside of us because of this traditional upbringing within all the societies. Formally, some people expose their attitudes, but when they go down from the stage, you actually notice that they have this patriarchic behavior. This is what a colleague from Rwanda said. We have to be the change we want to see within ourselves and within other people. So we are the one, and we are the starting point. The solutions are the process. The gender is the process, just like everything in our life. But to open all these issues, which some of them are very taboo themes or vulnerable, to observe this alternative and queer scene, which is by the mainstream media completely marginalized and neglected. And we are a kind of people who wanted to go out of this marginalization and discover and disclose all these issues. This is also the point where we speak about interconnections, intercultural issues. I yesterday listened to my favorite world politicians, and all these mechanisms, I concluded that I have actually transphobia, misogynia, and everything I wrote about, all these mechanisms, but actually they take all the energy out of us, and this is not the only way how to fight, but open dialogues and discussions, how to encourage ourselves are most important, so that we remind us not to give up our fight. All of this that we have already spoke about, it is historically advancing and progressing in the sense of history, actually. I can say that now we have some changes which are positive and which is new in this historical aspect. Sorry, but I can't hear the speaker now because she's not using the microphone. Of course, I just wanted to say the same as you actually now told us. Even though we have that kind of progress, there is still a traditional power within our society and within all of us, which can easily be manipulated. Which is educational, this is something we inherit. For all of us.
This is the importance of language. What Milena spoke, nobody talked about it earlier, in the sphere of feminism, we made an agreement that some things must be changed and called their own names. There is the female gender that is problematic in many countries, inclusive of America, where actresses do not want to be called actresses. They feel that this is not good. It's not good for me to be the actress. It's pejorative. Our conscience fights with our personal prejudices, but to that effect, if we are better students and insist within our minor or bigger organizations and all organizations, not only institutions, to give things different names, to practice more. It's in our country. It was the theme yesterday was the violence over women. Where is the tolerance plague? Where is the threshold of the tolerance? We don't want to tolerate violence, but we have the strategy. Okay, let's tolerate this and that, and they're actually speaking about what is possible and what can be done in the future. Perhaps we need to focus. To what has been achieved up to now, defend with more decisiveness but not aggressiveness, to set up the criteria in small groups and in big institutions, whoever works wherever. I think that here we are prone to avoiding our right to ask back the institutions that are taken away from us. We ask for alternative spaces. Why don't pressure the RTS, the public television institution? I wrote to the film, to this national television, to ask them play the stories. I saw a documentary story, and the new world opened to me. There was an attempt of pride that was devastated. I have an idea. In the prime time, one documentary movie every week. I will send you the list. Of course, I never got the answer back from them. Perhaps the initiative where every one of us would demand this. We have nice examples of organization of communities. I would like to add something. What you said just now, to say something more, to explicate. I'm an optimist that without any corrections, this global crisis somehow showed off completely the neoliberal globalism. The countries that claimed that there are no boundaries within the European Union, they somehow suddenly built up those boundaries again, and they struggled for the respiratory apparatuses, for the masks, for the equipment coming from the Eastern markets, coming from the Eastern producers that have produced for decades back everything for the Western world. Actually, we entered the harsh crisis. For the moment, the state, the government, under the inverted commas, came back through the big doors. We do not need now to allow the national creature, the national government that is understood in the wrong way, but to see the system that cares. Now I return to the word care. They care, the government care about the safety, security, about the health, social security, the safety and the standard human existential rights. That's what you have just mentioned. You saw the pride failed. You wrote to the RTS, the public broadcasting company, national broadcasting company. If the female organization would cooperate with this broadcasting company for them to purchase the documentary movies, we somehow managed to have success in this. And it would have some results. Now we are at the threshold of signing a contract with them. If we would introduce various curriculums into the education, not only the organization dealing in the education, but also the wider spectruses of organization. And Vishnja Kisic said in the last year's Manik, defending Belgrade from gondolas, all the colleagues from the public sector that can be gained for our side, for our purpose. We should be solidar, but we are now solidar by not telling to one another certain things. We should speak out. We should struggle for right things and say how the things are standing to each other. It is very important for me, maybe not directly linked to our wide theme, but it is linked to our situation. On the example of Professor Šešić, often reading your posts, I'm positively astonished and encouraged by your very courageous reactions. And I think, oh my God, what will happen to this woman? Because you come from the institutions, you come from big academic institutions, and you're one of the rare experts and authors that writes on the independent scene. You show the practices, and you make the fantastic bridge between the two scenes, the two worlds, and so on. Your example is so rare, so lonely, and I'm interested, why don't we see from the academic environment, the so-called public sector, why our colleagues, our lady colleagues, our friends or our male friends, why are they so afraid? Why are they frightened? I ask you for the answer. What are the ways to get them to react? Let me say first, they are not frightened. They want to avoid the mud into which you are put by the tabloid media and politicians as soon as you say something that they dislike and you speak out. They attack you. They find 1,000 ways, sometimes civilized, sometimes non-civilized language. The same minister, a month ago, for example, my statement about the cholerats, relatively for his standards, he attacked me. Some other people also gave their statements. Nobody was attacked, but my statement was attacked by the ministry, was reacted to, and my work, 10 years of work, was questionable all of a sudden. People want to avoid such mud. Nebojša Ramčević very mildly said that the statement of the ministry reminds him of the Nazism, and he saw that he was told to be stupid, he was insulted. I try not to remember, but the vocabulary, the street vocabulary applied towards him, threatening with a court claim for his statement that was very correct in my point of view. The statement of the Ministry of Culture reminds me of the fascist statements. Most women, out of any reason whatsoever, for their children, they don't want to see their name through the mud. They have, they are modest, and they have fear leading them to the conformity. In that sense, no, it is not necessary for me to stand up with my name and surname and survive what awaits me. So nobody can lose their employment at the faculty. It is possible, but not so easy. You can be in a position not to advance. In the Montenegro, for example, our colleague Radmila Vojvodić loses the position of the rector at the university somebody who for 20 years struggled for the power, and now she is moved from the power because she does not want to name the school in Berane as a rector. She doesn't want to say that this school needs to be the medical faculty. That it deserves to be the faculty. So the government is ready to step down on somebody who has fought with them, said nothing against them, just struggling for the implementation of a law, and they did everything to move her from the position in spite of the autonomy of the faculty. And we see this happening here in Serbia as well. So these non-pleasant things that can happen to you, if you clearly speak your mind, you can end up in the mud. They will just let you go through the media, and Slađana and Dejan Neđedović, and let me not count the women, the managers of the institutions of culture, who ended up in various ways rejected, disregarded, and so on. So this is one of the reasons. In the next segment, Milena, we will talk about this much more. 3 hours seemed a lot of time, but this is a very complex theme, and the time passed very quickly. I will give the now occasion to our Zoom participants if you have final thoughts to share with us, if you are still here. If our Zoom participants,
Hello, it was a great pleasure to be part of this conversation. And I think really the subject was amazing. It's an eye-opener in many different directions. And I think what 2020 has done to all of us is to go back to our books and recharge and redefine and reshift on different strategies of what works right now. And I think this conversation was really good. So it's just time to reshift, to regear. If you're fighting a battle and you're not winning, that's a sign that you need to just go back to your drawing board and find out, because the gap is there and we need to address it, but it is the how that we need to just keep working out and figuring out. And there's no specific how. How depends on a particular situation where you are. So I wish you all the very best and hope to see you all in Rwanda.
I would like to say thank you for the invitation again. And really, I think it's so necessary to not only to work on a local level, but globally. And I think this was a good discussion to see that we all from different countries, with different ways to do it, have the same object, to struggle for feminist approaches in very different ways.
I would also like to thank for the invitation and having us there. For me, this was really big experience now from other positions from Germany to speak with colleagues from Serbia. And I'm really delighted to hear these topics which I work now from different perspectives, and also more from artistic perspective, because I come from different field, from anthropological field. And thank you very much once more.
Thank you to all of you for a fantastic conversation. I would like now to add the topics that we have. We came back to solidarity, and we are happy that we put up this issue, because solidarity is very important, not only within feminist and this kind of struggle. We have to put feminism as a positive issue, so that all of us, no matter whether we are female or males, we can be feminists, And this is the common fight, not only the fight of women. And the last issue that is also very important, care, is the issue that we should think of and include within this battle. So thank again to all of you. The information for you, there is another session after the lunch break at 2 o'clock, and you are more than welcome to join us again. So please. And we all call you now to join to have lunch at another room.